Hello, everybody. I'm David Mustonen, Director of Communications for the Dearborn Public Schools. Welcome to Happenings in the Dearborn Public Schools. And joining me, of course, as always, Dr. Maleyko.
Very excited to be here with you and continue with the show. And do you think that the ratings are going to keep us on for another year? What have you?
I hope so. I hope so. We're going to have to start pumping it out. I think a lot more Twitter activity may help us a little bit. So that's on you.
Some tweet drives.
Yeah,
all right.
some tweet drives to get the show's ratings up.
So then I just have to get Mother Nature going a little bit because that'll spike up as you saw. I don't know if you saw the statistics, like 40,000 views around the last snow day over the 2 days.
That's
Activity
pretty good.
on Twitter.
Activity on Twitter.
Yeah, so.
And joining us on the show today, two very, very special guests. First, Dr. Dan Patterson, who is our Director of Assessment. Dan,
hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Ms. Fatme Faraj, who is our Director of School improvement, but you also have a component in there that has to do with coaching and as well, correct?
Leadership coaching.
Leadership coaching as well. So that's why I didn't want to put one before the other. So sorry, apologize. But around the district, we hear the word SIP a lot. And really, for us, that's an acronym for School Improvement Process, and that's your area of expertise. But before we talk about that, we want to kind of talk about how we get there first, and some of the things that we use in those school improvement plans. And I think we'll talk with Dr. Patterson about assessment.
Yeah, Dr. Patterson, so glad to have both of you here. And
Thank you.
I know we presented at the November Board of Education meeting, on accountability from a national and state level, which most of the accountability is state, but we do have to comply with the federal rules as well. And then how that fits into the assessments that we're using in the district. And then what do we do with it? So, Dr. Patterson, I know last time, I kind of talked about, the state system, the MSTEP test. Right. And then we talked a little bit about what we're doing in the district with NWA. Can you talk about maybe some of the assessments that we're using? Some because we have to, because of the state, and we have to follow, and others because we think it helps our students.
Yes, so there's been a lot of changes in assessment in the last several years. Not just in Michigan, but across the nation, several states have switched standards. And with that switch in standards, we've kind of gone away from some of the multiple choice A, B, C, D, paper and pencil assessments to online assessments that are more rigorous and kind of assess higher order thinking skills. And so that's where the MSTEP has come in. So the state's made a transition to that over the last couple of years.
A point that you made on that too, online, that was actually the first time that Dearborn last year, 16, went to an online version. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we have seen with the assessment systems in the state. And part of it is dictated by the federal government. Right. If they want to, not that they legally have jurisdiction, but if they want to, they can take away your funding. Mm-hmm. So that's how states, they want to comply, and we do get a lot of funding. But I know it seems like it's been changing a lot. Can you explain some of the changes the state's been implementing? I know this year was online, before it was something different, and then maybe we could talk about where we think it's heading with that test.
Right. So some of the main reasons that it has changed is when Michigan adopted new standards, we needed new assessments that are more aligned to these standards. And so we've actually gone through a couple different iterations of those. I think the state piloted the Smarter Balanced Assessment a few years ago, wanted to do something slightly different, so we've been using MSTEP, which is similar to Smarter Balanced but has some changes to it. And because of just how schools need to prepare from going to paper and pencil testing, which we've been doing for a decade, to online testing, we did have a couple years of transition where we could do the new test on paper and pencil, and then it does look very different to students when you take it online. And so last year was our first year doing that online, and so it's a new experience for our teachers and for our students to do it that way. So, for example, students, might be used to writing essays, paper and pencil, mm-hmm. and, the new assessment requires some keyboarding skills because you're going to be typing up your essays. And so those are all, new experiences for students that they need to, to adapt to it. And some of the questions also look differently than what they're used to in the past.
And I think, too, that, if kids have that natural ability with technology because they're technology natives and they grow up with it. And so parents sometimes have a hard time understanding, well, why is it harder for, these kids, they technology all the time. Why is it harder for them to take a test on technology? But it is a different experience than playing a video game or something along those lines.
it's something, I think, when you're on the phone, it's a different way of communicating versus on a keyboard when you're composing a written piece.
Sure.
It's a total different skill set that you're using, where most of it is, I walk through the high school here at Dearborn High, for example, and quick, and they're quicker, they're faster than me on the phone. Before I know it, we already have a tweet out with my picture on it, with the student. But that is not the same skill level that, transfers over to taking those assessment on the MSTEP. It's a different skill set that you need.
Right, definitely. Although there are some things that students will get from, other ways that they interact with the computer. They need to drag and drop and select text and do things like that, which they do with other, situations that they're in. What makes it a little more challenging is the questions are probably a little more rigorous than what they've seen on assessments in the past. And the new assessments are also computer adaptive. So for some students that have always been able to kind of fly through an assessment because it's very easy for them, when students start to get questions correct, it actually becomes a little harder for them trying to find out about where they're kind of tune in where their actual ability level is in that subject. And that requires a little more perseverance on the student's part as well.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the other assessments we use then, like NWEA, which we've had in the district, and how we use that, and then what we do with it? I know we're going to get to Ms. Faraj next, but she kind of comes in after we look at the data.
And one other thing I just wanted to mention about some of the
sure.
transitions, just at MSTEP we give in elementary through middle school. We've also transitioned to the new redesigned SAT at the high school level, and this was actually the first year that was given nationwide as well. And really the main focus is that all of these assessments are really supposed to tap into kind of college and career readiness skills for our students. But because of all the transitions that we've had over the last several years, the district has really wanted something a little more stable that we could use to drive our improvement. And so I think it's been 3 years ago that we decided to use the NWEA assessment. It's similar to MSTEP in the fact that it is computer-based, students take it online, and it is adaptive. And this is an assessment that we give 3 times a year, and students are able to see their growth over time. And it's an assessment that's scaled in a way that from kindergarten up through 8th grade, and those are the grades that we give it, you can see their learning trajectory over the course of all of those years.
Is NWA, is this the test that kind of adjust questions as you're going, as the student is taking the test? So if it asks me 2 plus 3 and I answer 6, and it asks me 4 plus 1 and I answer 7, that it kind of sees I'm having some problems there, and so it adjusts those questions. I know that's a simple, oversimplified example, but is that what am I correct in that's what NWA is? That's one of the
exactly
one of the aspects of that test.
Right. So it assesses students on a wide range of things that they'll be learning in school, and it does adjust based on how the student answers each particular question. So if they get a couple wrong, it might make another question a little more accessible to them. If they get several correct in a row, it might make it a little more challenging. And one thing that is very different than some of our older assessments, when you think about taking a test that we might have taken in school, you would want to get an 80% was a B, a 90% was an A. Most of the computer adaptive tests now are really all designed to where all students are meant to miss about half of the questions. So it's not so much about the total percent that you get right, it's a combination of how difficult the question was along with which ones you scored correctly or not. So, but with this new format, we're actually able to, with fewer questions, kind of get a better indicator of where a student is than we did with fixed form tests.
Right, and I was just going to say, and then the teacher uses that data, right, to help them determine where that student is and adjust instruction accordingly. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. And so with, and with state level assessments, some of the information we get back is a little more limited than what they would get if they're giving classroom assessments to their students, on a weekly or daily basis. But with NWA, we do get back some detailed results about where a student might have some strengths and weaknesses, and there are some tools that we use along with that to help kind of tailor their instruction.
So just to kind of lead in, because you mentioned you take those results, one of the things that we've seen the state, and there has been some changes that have occurred, as I mentioned, and we're looking at possibly some more changes that our state superintendent has announced. It's not finalized, but they may actually be looking at, going to a system where you may have the MSTEP every so many years and then NWA yearly to really look at that growth data. Because I know the NWA, we get the results right away and we can use it for the students. And so that's really valuable to us, and we kind of support that. We support looking at many different measures, not just those two, in fact. But then it comes in with Ms. Faraj, so the school improvement process. Can you kind of talk about, so we take this, we welcome the accountability. I would look at it as an internal accountability in the district of going around and sharing positive information. So we look at the data, we look at where the schools are, and then we look at instructional strategies, and then we have to implement in the building. So how does the school improvement work?
So a school improvement plan is like a roadmap that the school has to put forth so that they would know, the school staff would know where they are and where they need to be next. Just like the strategic plan for the district that we have just finished working on, it draws a picture for us on how to go about improving our student achievement as a whole. The same thing for the schools. They have individualized plans based on what Dr. Patterson just mentioned. And the data piece, which is the student assessment along with other data measures, they help us draw that picture. They help us realize where we are, what we need to do next. For example, the student achievement and outcomes, which comes from MSTEP and NWA, is one piece of the school improvement plan process. Other measures include demographic data, for example, how many English limited proficient students we have, how many mobile students we have, which is mobility, economically disadvantaged, how many of the students are on free and reduced lunch, and all these subgroups are part of the data we look at. It's not only student achievement data, it is demographic data. And along with that, we use process data. Process data is how are we going about implementation? Are we monitoring implementation with fidelity? So the school improvement process takes so many different paths, and including all staff members in this process, parents, students, district staff, and school staff is a necessity. We have to come up with a plan as a whole entity in order for us to have buy-in and fidelity in implementation. Now, looking at the data analysis piece, which all schools are following this process, we look at the student achievement and we figure out where the gaps are. Where are students lacking skills, and we make our goals and plans reflect these specific skills so that we implement strategies to overcome these gaps.
And I know our district, and this is one of the, you're in charge of the process, you did great work when you were principal of the school. You know, going to Maples and looking at some of the plan, and now you're leading the district, and we've had this process in place for you know, going back to 2006, but it's really evolved. And what I'm referring to is not necessarily the planning process, school improvement, but we have like this internal accountability, sharing of knowledge, sharing of information, where we will go into every school in the district, right, two times
a year.
2 times a year, and we basically look at the inputs, the monitoring, instruction. Do you have any, would you want to mention a little bit about what we're doing there, including the fact that we have a kind of a new process this year in the second semester?
Yes. For this year, we have a minimum of 2 visits because in feeder school meetings for the 3 high schools and their feeders, we do informal walks. And the informal walks will help us determine areas of focus, and it helps us also determine the strengths so we can build on them. For this year, we created a new protocol that when we visit, we look at this specific protocol or rubric, and we look at specific strategies that we hope to see in every classroom in Dearborn Public Schools. So when we walk in and we evaluate the implementation level of these specific strategies, we come back and we debrief, giving feedback on the areas of need and also the areas of strength. We do that 1 round in the fall for every individual school, and then we do unannounced visits starting this February. Next week, we're going to start the unannounced visits. Again, the schools receive a feedback report after we visit, and they share with their staff, and they talk about which areas they need to focus on. And also sometimes we invite them to the district meetings if they have areas of strength that we wish for these areas to be shared with the rest of the schools.
Now, so you've got, every school has a school improvement plan, like you said, a roadmap to how they're going to deliver instruction, their areas of strengths and weaknesses for their students and all that. Then we have these school improvement teams that go out to each school to see if they're following their roadmap.
Correct, and we call these walkthroughs.
Okay. Who's on those teams, and you said every single classroom. So these teams get into every single classroom.
Correct. And we have principals, assistant principals, and people in leadership positions, along with classroom teachers, participate in these visits. So they sign up to participate in a minimum of 2 visits. Many principals and other staff members participate in more. And we go as a team to the school and we visit every classroom. We divide up the classrooms amongst the team members, and we walk and then we do the feedback and debrief. And I think it's a great process because on the national level, with a continuous improvement process, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for implementing a process with advanced ed, which is the accreditation system that accredits school. They're looking to implement a continuous improvement process where all staff members in any individual school is engaged in the plan, not only seeing the plan and knowing that they have a plan, they need to be engaged in the process and in the evaluation of the process. And I believe this is what's happening in Dearborn Public Schools.
And it's another accountability measurement piece. Parents are there, and I'm at every school visit, by the way.
Sure.
So I go through every, as does Ms. Faraj and the cabinet team. So this is one of the things that we are trained in, and we look for specific things. And so it's really, again, it's an accountability. It is, but it's a sharing too. It's not an evaluation of an individual employee. It's looking at a school and looking how can we take the assessment data that Dr. Patterson has brought, disaggregated, looked at for us, and how do we use that to help the students. And so really that's what it's about. Getting in the schools, spending time in the schools, and helping students to increase their achievement and their needs in the school district so they become lifelong learners and citizens in society.
So and I think the most important part of that is it's not a got you. You're not going out to the schools to catch somebody, to get them. You're going out to the schools to help them. And by having these teams made up of district and principals, teachers from all the different schools, they get to see what's going on in the other schools. That's like a bonus of it all.
It is, and sorry, I just kind of jumped in
No,
there,
no,
but
no,
it is a sharing of knowledge, so then you get consistencies across the district, and you're very strategic with your implementation of your strategic plan.
Very nice. That all ties in great. Real quick, just before we go, we got to wrap things up here and go, but a question that comes up a lot, and I know sometimes it's not always something that the district can control, it's the amount of testing that students are going through. And the other question, this came up at a parent meeting we were at the other morning, teaching to the test. So I know the amount of testing at the state level, they're trying to decrease that. At the district level, where are we?
We've worked on that, and Dan, I don't know if you want to comment, but part of it, the decreasing started before you came because you've been here just over a year, but that's bringing in the NWA and eliminating some of the other assessments we've had that that are under our control.
Right.
But the MSTEP, though, I mean, we're obligated to follow that, and I know that the state actually reduced the amount of time for that test.
Okay.
Right.
So some of that was for reduction. Some of it's within our control. Some of it is not within our control. But I can tell you, we know our state superintendent up there. They're listening and they're hearing the same discourse that I'm hearing and you're hearing from parents. And we've had parents come to the board to say, there's too much testing, and then the test prep. But I mean, we've never advocated for test prep in the district.
No, and trying to have a very well-balanced assessment system is something that we're striving to do. So we definitely want to look for areas to where everything that we're doing makes sense and kind of fits together into a bigger picture. In terms of test prep, that's one of the kind of negative outcomes that came out of our previous accountability system. Mm-hmm. And when you really only evaluate schools on a single measure like test scores, in some places that can encourage just teaching to the test and narrowing the skills that we're looking at, but that's something that we don't ever encourage here.
Sure.
We definitely want to have high benchmarks and high standards for our students that we're trying to strive to, but those are things that we need to do on a daily basis and not just for the inflation of a test score, but really for the actual true learning that's happening on a daily basis.
Great. Dan, Fatme? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So you can't wait to be on the next show, right?
They were so excited,
coming
they
back.
couldn't wait.
They're coming back.
Dan was saying he thought maybe that a text on a snow day was coming through. He was gonna, but no. I knew you guys were here. Had we not had this show, we may have had the snow day. But I had to make sure I wouldn't want to disappoint.
Didn't want to disappoint.
So.
Glenn, thanks a lot, as always. It's a pleasure. And thank you for taking a few moments of your time. This one ran a little bit longer than we usually do. But hey, it was great information, and it was two great guests. So we just can't throw people off the stage. We love them too much. So anyway, we will wrap things up, and thank you. And remember always to check us out and make sure you're always up on what's happening in the Dearborn Public Schools.